Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, ancient structure, a pyramid, a stone circle, a network of lines carved into the earth, and realizing that the people who built it left behind no written records, no letters, no diaries, no histories. They have vanished, and all that remains are these silent, monumental questions etched into the landscape. These mysterious builders, these architects of wonder, managed to achieve breathtaking feats of engineering, art, and social organization without relying on the written word. Their stories are not found in libraries or archives, but in the very stones they shaped, the earth they moved, and the symbols they left behind for us to interpret. It's a haunting and humbling thought that entire cultures, with all their knowledge, dreams, and daily lives, could rise, flourish, and disappear, leaving only fragments for us to piece together. Today, we're setting out on a journey to explore these enigmatic civilizations, the builders who vanished. We'll travel across time and continents, from the sun-baked plains of the Indus Valley to the misty highlands of ancient Britain, from the intricate Nazca Lines in Peru to the awe-inspiring ruins of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Along the way, we'll uncover how historians and archaeologists use every available clue, from pottery shards and burial sites to oral traditions and celestial alignments, to reconstruct the lives of people who communicated not through ink and parchment, but through architecture, art, and shared memory. This isn't just a story about the past, it's about human ingenuity, resilience, and the universal drive to create, commemorate, and make sense of our place in the world. By the end of our exploration, you'll see how these silent civilizations continue to shape our understanding of history, technology, and even ourselves. Their legacies remind us that writing is just one way to record a culture's essence, and that sometimes the most profound messages are conveyed without a single word. So join me as we step into the footprints of those who built wonders, faced unimaginable challenges, and left behind a mystery that beckons us to listen more closely to the echoes of the past. This is a journey into the heart of what it means to be human, and it's one you won't want to miss. Consider the sheer scale of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, a site that utterly rewrites our understanding of early human society. Built over 11,000 years ago, long before the invention of writing or even settled farming, it consists of massive, T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in great stone circles, each pillar weighing many tons and covered in intricate carvings of animals and abstract symbols. The people who built this were hunter-gatherers, nomads who supposedly lived in small, mobile bands. So how did they possibly coordinate the labor to quarry, transport, and erect these monoliths? What shared belief or urgent purpose was powerful enough to bring them together for a project of such breathtaking ambition? This site, and others like it, stand as a direct challenge to our conventional narrative of human progress. We often assume that complex society, religion, and monumental art must follow the development of agriculture and writing. But Göbekli Tepe turns that idea on its head, suggesting that the human drive to create, to build something larger than oneself, and to connect with the cosmos might actually be the very catalyst that brought people together and eventually led to the invention of everything else. Then there are the Nazca Lines in Peru, another profound mystery etched into the very skin of the planet. From ground level, these are simply shallow grooves in the desert floor, but from the air, they resolve into colossal geometric shapes and immense figures of animals and plants. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider, a monkey with a coiled tail. The Nazca people created these geoglyphs between 2,000 and 1,500 years ago by carefully removing the dark, sun-baked top layer of pebbles to reveal the lighter sand beneath. The figures are so vast that their creators could never have seen the full effect of their work. This raises an incredible question: who were they for? If not for human eyes, were they intended for deities in the sky? Perhaps they were part of a ritual landscape, pathways for religious processions connected to water and fertility in an extremely arid environment. The lines are a form of communication, but not one meant for daily messages or record-keeping. They are a permanent, monumental expression of faith and worldview, a way of linking the community to the divine and the celestial. This is the core of the enigma. These civilizations used architecture and land art as their primary language. Without written words, they invested their knowledge, their beliefs, and their identity into the physical world around them. The noted archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who led the excavations at Göbekli Tepe, described it not as a settlement but as a temple, a mountain sanctuary, a place of pilgrimage. He believed the carvings on the pillars were not mere decoration but a form of symbolic storytelling, a sacred lexicon. The structures themselves were the text. This idea transforms how we see these silent cultures. They weren't primitive or lacking. They were simply choosing a different medium for their expression, one of immense durability and symbolic power. A book can burn, a scroll can rot, but a multi-ton stone pillar, carefully set into the earth, can endure for millennia, carrying its message across countless generations. This universal human impulse to create and commemorate is something we all share. It's the same drive that leads us to build skyscrapers, erect memorials, and create public art. These ancient builders remind us that history is not confined to libraries. It is embedded in the landscape, waiting to be read by those who know how to look. Their silent stones ask us to listen differently, to understand that a society's complexity isn't measured by its archives, but by its vision, its cooperation, and its ability to leave a mark on the world that echoes long after its voice has faded. So how do we begin to translate this silent language of stone and earth? We turn to the meticulous science of archaeology, a discipline that acts as our primary decoder ring for these vanished worlds. Imagine an archaeologist not as a treasure hunter, but as a crime scene investigator for the distant past. Their crime scene is an ancient settlement, and every fragment, every layer of soil, is a piece of evidence waiting to be analyzed. The goal is to reconstruct a complete picture of a culture from the physical objects they left behind. The broken pottery, the discarded tools, the remains of their meals, and the very foundations of their homes. This isn't about finding a single spectacular artifact. It's about painstakingly collecting thousands of mundane clues that, when pieced together, tell a profound story of human existence. The process starts with excavation, but it's far more careful and deliberate than simply digging a hole. Archaeologists use a technique called stratigraphy, which is based on a simple but powerful principle. The deeper you go, the older the layers are. By carefully excavating and documenting each distinct layer of soil and debris, they can create a vertical timeline of a site. A piece of pottery found in a higher layer is younger than a stone tool found 10 centimeters below it. This allows researchers to build a sequence of events, to see how a site changed over centuries or even millennia. They can track the introduction of new technologies, like the shift from stone to metal tools, or observe the evolution of architectural styles, from simple pit houses to complex multi-room structures. But stratigraphy only gives a relative date. It tells you what came before what, but not exactly when. This is where absolute dating methods come in, and the most famous of these is radiocarbon dating. This revolutionary technique measures the decay of a radioactive isotope of carbon found in once living organic material like charcoal from an ancient hearth, seeds from a storage pit, or even the bones of the people themselves. By calculating how much of this isotope has decayed, scientists can determine with remarkable precision when that organism died, pinning a calendar date to the layer it was found in. This transforms a relative sequence into a concrete historical timeline, allowing us to say that a particular temple was built around 3,600 years ago, or that a specific culture flourished for 8 centuries before its decline. The stories these objects tell are incredibly detailed. A simple potsherd is more than just broken clay. Its shape, decoration, and manufacturing technique can identify the specific culture that made it. If that same type of pottery is found hundreds of miles away, it reveals ancient trade routes and networks of cultural exchange. Microscopic analysis of residue inside a pot can tell us exactly what food or drink it once held, giving us a direct link to ancient diets and culinary practices. Similarly, a humble stone tool, examined under a microscope, will show tiny wear patterns that tell us how it was used for scraping hides, cutting wood, or harvesting grains. We can literally see the marks left by the last person who used it thousands of years ago. Perhaps the most intimate insights come from the study of burials. How a society treats its dead speaks volumes about its beliefs and social structure. A grave filled with exquisite jewelry, finely crafted weapons, and offerings of food suggests the individual was a person of high status, perhaps a chief or a priest. In contrast, a simple burial with few or no goods might indicate a commoner. By studying the skeletons themselves, bioarchaeologists can determine a person's sex, age at death, health, and even cause of death. They can see evidence of malnutrition, healed fractures from accidents or conflicts, and diseases like arthritis. From this, we can build a heartbreakingly human picture of their lives, the physical hardships they endured, the medical knowledge they possessed, and the care they provided for one another. Even the grandest architectural patterns serve as a form of unwritten record. The precise alignment of a monument with the rising sun on the summer solstice, as seen at Stonehenge or Newgrange, isn't a coincidence. It's a clear indicator of advanced astronomical knowledge and a deep, culturally ingrained connection to the cycles of the cosmos. The layout of a city's streets and the placement of its public buildings can reveal how power was distributed and how people moved through their world. This hands-on detective work, combining dirt under the fingernails excavation with cutting-edge laboratory science, is how we bridge the immense gaps left by silence. It transforms scattered, silent clues into a coherent and deeply human narrative, giving voice to those who built their legacy not in ink, but in earth and stone. But if stones and bones form one half of the translation guide for these silent cultures, then the spoken word forms the other. For thousands of years, long before the first clay tablet was inscribed, human societies relied on a living, breathing library, oral tradition. These were not merely campfire tales for entertainment. They were the sacred and practical repositories of a people's entire world. History, law, moral codes, and spiritual beliefs were all carefully woven into stories, songs, and poems, meticulously memorized and passed from one generation to the next by designated keepers of this knowledge. While these narratives undoubtedly evolved over centuries, acquiring layers of symbolism and mythological embellishment, at their core, they often preserve profound truths about real events, ancient landscapes, and deep cultural memory. They offer us a precious, albeit filtered, window into the minds and experiences of people who left no written records of their own. Consider the profound example of indigenous Australian cultures, whose connection to the land is narrated through the Dreamtime. These are not myths in the sense of simple fiction. They are a complex framework of creation stories that explain the origin of the world, its animals, and its people. For generations, these stories were shared orally, describing in precise detail the formation of specific rock formations, river courses, and coastal lines. In a stunning validation of this ancient knowledge, modern geological and archaeological studies have repeatedly shown that these oral histories contain accurate descriptions of the Australian landscape from over 7,000 years ago, including memories of times when sea levels were significantly lower and continents were connected differently. The stories recall the flooding of coastal plains and the separation of islands, events that actually occurred at the end of the last ice age. This isn't just folklore, it's a millennia-old oral map and historical record, preserving an account of environmental change that science has only recently been able to confirm. This powerful interplay between spoken history and physical evidence isn't confined to Australia. The ancient Minoan civilization on Crete, which thrived over 3,500 years ago, left behind the magnificent palace of Knossos with its vivid frescoes and complex architecture, but their own written scripts, Linear A, remain undeciphered. We don't have a single Minoan history book. Almost everything we think we know about them comes from later Greek myths recorded by civilizations like the Mycenaeans and Classical Greeks. These stories spoke of a powerful King Minos, a cunning inventor named Daedalus, and a terrifying labyrinth housing a half-man, half-bull creature called the Minotaur. For a long time, these were dismissed as exciting but purely fictional fantasies. However, archaeology has begun to reveal tantalizing kernels of truth within these myths. The sprawling, multi-level layout of the Knossos Palace complex could easily have been remembered by later generations as a confusing, maze-like labyrinth. The Minoans were known to practice bull leaping, a dangerous acrobatic ritual involving bulls, which could have evolved into the legend of the Minotaur. The myth of Thera's volcanic explosion, which may have contributed to the Minoan decline, echoes in the later Greek story of the lost city of Atlantis. The stories, though fantastical, seem to preserve a distorted memory of a real, powerful maritime civilization that once dominated the Aegean Sea. Of course, working with oral traditions requires a delicate and respectful touch. Historians and anthropologists aren't looking for a literal, word-for-word historical account within an epic poem or a creation story. Instead, they act like cultural detectives, searching for deeper themes, recurring symbols, and plausible events that might be echoed in the archaeological record. A story about a great flood found in hundreds of cultures across the world likely doesn't describe a single global event, but it may point to a universal human experience of catastrophic local flooding in our deep past. A legend about a long migration from a distant homeland can often be cross-referenced with linguistic patterns and genetic evidence to trace actual population movements. This process of triangulation, using material evidence to test the claims of oral tradition, and using oral tradition to give meaning to material evidence, is how we build a richer, more nuanced understanding. It allows us to move beyond simply knowing what these people built and to begin glimpsing why they built it. We can start to understand the fears, aspirations, and beliefs that drove them to move mountains of stone or to etch giant figures into a desert floor. The stories passed down through countless generations become a vital key, helping to unlock the motivations behind the monuments, transforming silent ruins from mere puzzles of engineering into echoes of a once vibrant human spirit. Now, let's turn our attention to one of the most compelling and mysterious examples of a silent civilization, the Indus Valley civilization. Flourishing over 4,000 years ago in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, this society was a contemporary of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, yet it stands apart for its profound and puzzling silence. Its two great cities, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were metropolises of their time, home to tens of thousands of people living in a level of urban sophistication that would not be seen in the region again for millennia. The layout of these cities reveals a mind-boggling degree of planning. Streets were laid out in a precise grid pattern, with entire neighborhoods dedicated to craftspeople, and houses were equipped with private bathrooms that connected to a city-wide, covered sewer system, a feat of public sanitation unmatched until the Roman era. They used standardized, kiln-fired bricks in a uniform ratio, and their systems of weights and measures were so consistent that excavated stones from sites hundreds of miles apart are identical. This points to a highly organized, interconnected society with a strong sense of central authority and shared standards. Yet, for all this evidence of complex administration and daily life, the civilization is hauntingly mute. We have found over 4,000 objects inscribed with what appear to be symbols or script, primarily on small stone seals depicting animals like bulls, elephants, and a mysterious unicorn-like creature. But despite decades of effort by the world's top linguists and cryptographers, this script remains undeciphered. Most inscriptions are frustratingly short, just a handful of symbols leading to a fierce scholarly debate. Are we looking at a full-fledged writing system encoding a lost language, or is it a more limited form of proto-writing, perhaps just denoting family names, titles, or religious concepts? Without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text that could act as a key, the voices of the Indus people, their names, their laws, their poetry, remain locked away forever. This silence is made even more profound by what archaeologists have not found. In sharp contrast to the grandiose palaces of Mesopotamia or the towering pyramids of Egypt, there are no monumental tombs, no giant statues of kings, no great temples proclaiming the power of a god-king. There is no obvious central palace or royal citadel dominating the city skyline. The largest structures are a great bath at Mohenjo-Daro, which may have been used for communal rituals, and large, elevated platforms that might have served as granaries or public storehouses. This absence of overt, aggrandizing symbols of individual power has led many researchers to speculate that the Indus Valley civilization might have been organized very differently, perhaps as a collection of oligarchies, governed by a council of elders or merchants rather than a single all-powerful monarch. Their power and identity might have been invested in the community itself, in the remarkable efficiency of their plumbing and the orderly flow of their streets, rather than in the glorification of a single ruler. And then, around 1900 BC, this thriving, sophisticated civilization began to fade. The precise reasons for its decline are as enigmatic as its script. Earlier theories pointed to a violent invasion by nomadic Indo-European speakers, but this idea has largely fallen out of favor due to a lack of evidence for widespread destruction. The current consensus points to a more complex and gradual unraveling, likely driven by environmental factors. Shifts in the course of the mighty Indus River and its tributaries would have disrupted the agricultural heartland that fed the cities. Evidence suggests they faced prolonged droughts, possibly linked to climate change, which would have caused famine and forced populations to disperse into smaller, rural villages. Over time, the intricate urban system broke down. The writing, if that's what it was, fell out of use and was forgotten. The cities were slowly buried by silt and sand, their memory vanishing until archaeologists began to peel back the layers in the 19th century. The legacy of the Indus Valley civilization forces us to confront our own deep-seated biases about what makes a society advanced. We often equate civilization with kings, conquests, and written histories of great men. the Indus people challenged that notion entirely. They achieved staggering feats of social organization, urban planning, and economic coordination without leaving behind a single royal inscription or monument to their own glory. Their complexity was expressed not in boasting of power, but in the quiet, profound genius of a well-run city. They remind us that a civilization's true measure might not be in the loud proclamations it leaves behind, but in the quality of life it provided for its citizens and in the silent, enduring stones that whisper of a different way to be human. While the Indus Valley civilization astounds us with its urban anonymity, a different kind of mystery rises from the landscapes of ancient Europe. Scattered across the continent, from the windswept plains of Salisbury in England to the coastal regions of Brittany in France, stand silent armies of stone. These are the megaliths, a word that literally means large stones, and they are the enduring legacy of Neolithic cultures that mastered the earth and the sky without ever putting chisel to tablet. The most famous of these is, of course, Stonehenge, but it is just one node in a vast network of stone circles, solitary standing menhirs, and immense burial tombs known as dolmens that form a cryptic architectural language spoken across prehistoric Europe. The sheer scale of these projects is a testament to a level of social organization we are only beginning to appreciate. Consider the bluestones at Stonehenge, which were quarried from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a distance of over 140 miles. How did a supposedly primitive society transport dozens of multi-ton stones across such a vast and rugged distance? The prevailing theory suggests a combination of sledges, rollers, and water routes, a logistically nightmarish operation requiring the coordinated labor of hundreds, if not thousands, of people over many years. This wasn't a casual undertaking. It was a generational project driven by a motivation so powerful and so universally shared within the community that it justified this immense investment of time and energy. The same is true for the Karnak alignments in France, where over 3,000 standing stones were arranged in parallel rows stretching for miles. The collective effort implied by these sites speaks of a society capable of remarkable planning, cooperation, and a shared cultural purpose. That purpose seems deeply intertwined with an acute observation of the cosmos. The precision with which these structures align with celestial events reveals a sophisticated understanding of astronomy that is often startling. The central axis of Stonehenge is carefully oriented to frame the sunrise on the summer solstice, a day that would have held profound significance for an agricultural society marking the turning of the seasons. In Ireland, the entrance passage to the 5,000-year-old tomb at Newgrange is designed so that for a few precious minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, a narrow beam of sunlight travels directly down the passageway to illuminate the inner burial chamber. This was not a happy accident. It was a feat of precise engineering and astronomical observation, achieved millennia before the invention of the telescope or the written word. For these builders, the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars were not abstract concepts but integral parts of a sacred order, and their architecture was a way to physically connect their world to the rhythms of the universe. So what were these magnificent structures actually for? Without any written records, archaeologists must interpret their function from the evidence left behind. The presence of human remains in many dolmens and passage graves clearly indicates they served as tombs, places of burial and likely ancestral veneration. But their scale and complexity suggest they were far more than just cemeteries. They were likely also ceremonial centers, places where scattered communities would gather for seasonal festivals, rituals, and social bonding. The acoustics within some stone circles are peculiarly enhanced, leading to speculation about their use for chanting or rhythmic sound-making during ceremonies. They may have been places of healing, pilgrimage, or astronomical observation used to maintain an accurate calendar essential for planting and harvest. In all probability, they were multifunctional, the heart of their cultural and spiritual life. Ultimately, the true motivation of the megalithic builders remains locked within the stones themselves. Were they constructing portals to the spirit world, creating a permanent map of the heavens on earth, honoring powerful ancestors to ensure the community's continuity? We may never know for certain, but what is undeniable is that they were using architecture as their primary language. Each stone circle, each aligned passage, each towering menhir was a statement. It was a way of saying, we are here, we understand the world, we belong to this place, and we are connected to something greater than ourselves. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that communication and meaning can be etched into the landscape itself, creating a silent dialogue across millennia that continues to captivate and humble us today. Yet even the most resilient societies are not immune to the immense power of the natural world, a force that has repeatedly reshaped human destiny. The silent ruins we explore often hold clues to a dramatic and sometimes catastrophic end, where environmental pressures became too great to withstand. This wasn't simply a matter of a few bad harvests. We're talking about fundamental, long-term shifts in the very foundation of a civilization's existence: the climate that watered their crops, the resources that built their cities, and the stability of the ground beneath their feet. For cultures without a written history, their collapse is written instead in the geological record, in tree rings and layers of ice, telling a story of adaptation, desperation, and sometimes complete transformation. A powerful and deeply human example of this comes from the American Southwest, with the ancestral Pueblones, often known as the Anasazi. For centuries, they thrived in the breathtaking cliff dwellings of places like Mesa Verde, constructing intricate multi-story villages tucked into sandstone alcoves. Their society was complex, supported by sophisticated dry land farming techniques and extensive trade networks. Then, in the late 13th century, something happened. The great houses were abandoned. To understand why, scientists have turned to dendrochronology, the study of tree rings. The rings from ancient timbers used in these buildings reveal a terrifying story, a prolonged and severe megadrought that gripped the region for decades. Year after year, the rains failed, springs dried up, and carefully managed fields withered. This wasn't a short-term crisis. It was a slow, grinding environmental disaster that would have strained every social and political structure. Facing starvation and social upheaval, the people made a monumental decision. They left. They migrated to areas with more reliable water sources, dispersing and eventually giving rise to the modern Pueblo peoples. Their collapse wasn't an extinction but a strategic retreat and a cultural evolution forced by an unrelenting climate. On the other side of the world, a much more sudden and violent catastrophe may have shattered the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. Around the year 1600 BC, the volcanic island of Thera, just 100 kilometers north of Crete, exploded in one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. The event was apocalyptic. It would have been followed by towering tsunamis that smashed into the northern coast of Crete, devastating its proud ports and fleet. The sky would have been darkened for years by ash, crippling agriculture by blocking sunlight and poisoning the soil. This series of disasters, echoing through the generations, likely provided the seed for the later Greek myth of Atlantis, a sophisticated island kingdom that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night. While the Minoans didn't vanish immediately, their culture persisted in a weakened form before being absorbed by the Mycenaeans. The eruption of Thera was a knockout blow from which they could never fully recover. It's a stark reminder that even the most advanced and powerful societies are vulnerable to the random, brutal forces of geology. So how do we know all this? How can we be so certain about events that occurred millennia ago? The answers lie in the fascinating work of paleoclimatology and archaeological science. Researchers drilled deep into glaciers to extract ice cores. Each layer of ice, like a tree ring, represents a year of snowfall. Trapped within are tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere and chemicals that reveal past temperatures and even evidence of distant volcanic eruptions. From lake and ocean beds, they extract cores of sediment, studying fossilized pollen grains to map how vegetation changed over time. A shift from oak pollen to drought-resistant sagebrush tells a clear story of increasing aridity. By combining this physical data with the archaeological evidence, abandoned villages, layers of tsunami debris, the final, desperate stockpiling of resources, scientists can reconstruct these past environments with astonishing accuracy. They can create a timeline of disaster and response, showing not just that a culture fell, but often precisely why. This environmental perspective does more than just explain disappearances. It reframes our understanding of resilience. The end of a civilization is rarely a simple failure. For the ancestral Pueblones, resilience meant the courage to abandon centuries of investment and migrate to a new home. For others, it might have meant adapting their social structures, switching to new food sources, or developing new technologies. The silence they left behind in the historical record is often not a sign of weakness, but a testament to the overwhelming scale of the challenges they faced. Their stories are a profound reminder that human history is inextricably linked to the environment, a dialogue between our ingenuity and the planet's immense, unpredictable power. And it is within that dialogue that we find the origins of some of their most ingenious technological solutions, developed not in times of plenty, but in the crucible of survival. When we marvel at the silent ruins of these ancient cultures, it's easy to focus on the grand scale of their monuments and miss the quiet genius of their everyday ingenuity. The true measure of their technological prowess isn't just in the temples they left behind, but in the sophisticated, often subtle, solutions they developed to overcome immense environmental and logistical challenges. Without the wheel, without iron, and without written engineering manuals, they achieved feats that still leave modern experts in awe. Consider the Inca civilization of the Andes Mountains. They constructed a vast empire connected by a network of roads spanning over 25,000 miles, traversing some of the most treacherous and vertiginous terrain on Earth. Their stonemasonry is legendary. They fit massive, irregularly shaped blocks of granite together so perfectly that not even a razor blade can slide between them. This technique, known as ashlar masonry, wasn't just for show. In an earthquake-prone region, these interlocking stones would sway during a tremor and then settle back into place, making their structures incredibly resilient. This was a technology born of necessity and perfected through generations of careful observation and practiced skill, passed down from master to apprentice through hands-on demonstration and oral instruction. Their agricultural technology was equally brilliant. To feed a large population in the steep Andes, the Inca and their predecessors engineered vast, complex terracing systems. These were not simple steps cut into a hillside. They were sophisticated microclimates. Each terrace level could have a different temperature, allowing for a diverse range of crops to be grown at different altitudes. They built intricate irrigation canals to channel water from mountain springs, ensuring each level received the precise amount of moisture it needed. This was sustainable, precision farming on a monumental scale, all accomplished without written plans or hydraulic engineering textbooks. The knowledge of water flow, soil composition, and crop rotation was embedded in their cultural practices and communicated through doing. A young person would learn by working alongside their elders, absorbing the rhythms and techniques that allowed their society to not just survive, but to thrive in an environment that would challenge us even today with all our modern technology. Far to the north, another pre-literate culture was making a different kind of technological leap. The Olmecs of ancient Mesoamerica, often called the mother culture of the region, flourished over 3,000 years ago. They are famous for their colossal heads, carved from basalt and weighing up to 20 tons, but their most profound innovation might be something far more mundane yet revolutionary: the processing of rubber. The Olmecs were the first to discover how to harvest latex from the Panama rubber tree and mix it with juice from the morning glory vine to create a stable, durable rubber. This was a chemical invention of the highest order. They used this material to make rubber balls for a ritual ball game that was central to their culture, as well as for practical items like waterproof seals and possibly even rubberized textiles. This invention spread throughout Mesoamerica and became a cornerstone of regional culture for centuries, all without a single written formula. The recipe was a trade secret, a piece of vital knowledge transmitted through practice and guarded by skilled artisans. This transmission of complex practical knowledge through apprenticeship and oral tradition is a theme that unites these silent builders. We see it in the Polynesian voyagers who navigated the vast Pacific Ocean by reading the stars, the swells of the waves, and the flight patterns of birds, a skill so complex it takes a lifetime to master and was taught through chance and direct experience. We see it in the intricate lost wax casting method used by African cultures like the Kingdom of Benin to create breathtakingly detailed bronze sculptures. This process involves sculpting a model in wax, encasing it in clay, and then melting the wax away to leave a mold for molten metal. It's a multi-step, technically demanding procedure that requires an exact understanding of materials and temperatures, yet it was perfected and passed down through generations without a single written instruction manual. These were not primitive societies stumbling in the dark. They were innovative, observant, and brilliant engineers whose medium was not paper, but the physical world itself. Their legacy shows us that the history of technology is far richer and more diverse than a simple progression toward the written word, revealing a deep well of human intelligence expressed through the hands, the eyes, and the spoken story. But these incredible societies, for all their isolated genius, were rarely truly alone. Even across vast and treacherous expanses of ocean and desert, a powerful force was at work, silently weaving distant cultures together: trade. Without a single written treaty or shipping manifest, these silent civilizations built extensive networks of exchange that moved not just objects, but ideas, technologies, and artistic styles across astonishing distances. This wasn't simple barter between neighbors. It was a complex web of long-distance commerce that transformed the ancient world, proving that cultural diffusion is a universal human impulse that absolutely does not require the written word to flourish. One of the most breathtaking examples of this is the incredible journey of the Lapita people across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Starting around 3,500 years ago, these intrepid voyagers began an epic migration eastward from the islands of Southeast Asia. They were the first humans to reach and settle the remote islands of Melanesia and Polynesia, a feat of navigation that stands as one of the greatest adventures in human history. And as they island hopped across thousands of miles of open ocean, they left behind a very specific and consistent calling card: their distinctive pottery. Lapita pottery is instantly recognizable, decorated with intricate geometric patterns made by stamping the clay with a toothed tool. Archaeologists can literally trace the path of their migration by following the trail of these pottery shards, which appear on island after island, from the Bismarck Archipelago all the way to Samoa and Tonga. But they weren't just carrying pots, they were a complete package culture. Along with their ceramic style, they brought a suite of agricultural practices, including the cultivation of taro, yams, and breadfruit, and domesticated animals like chickens and pigs. This was a transfer of an entire lifestyle, a complete cultural kit, achieved through migration and contact, without a single written manual or map to guide them. Their legacy is the peopling of the Pacific, and they did it all through oral knowledge, celestial navigation, and the courage to sail into the unknown. On the other side of the world, a different kind of exchange was taking place, one that shows how even a civilization with writing could have its most profound impact through silent material trade. The Phoenicians, based in the Levant, were famous in the ancient world as master merchants and sailors. They certainly had a written language, and they are famously credited with spreading the precursor to our own alphabet. But their primary influence across the Mediterranean wasn't through conquering armies or imposing their literature. It was through the sheer ubiquity of their trade goods. They established trading posts and colonies from North Africa to Spain, and their most famous product was a vivid purple dye, extracted from the murex shellfish, that became a must-have status symbol for elites from Greece to Egypt. But beyond luxury goods, they traded in everyday items, glass, wine, cedar wood, and exquisite metalwork. As these objects circulated, so did Phoenician styles and techniques. Local artisans saw these desirable foreign goods and imitated them, incorporating Phoenician motifs into their own work. This process of indirect influence, of ideas hitchhiking on trade goods, is how technologies like advanced metalworking or glassblowing likely spread. The Phoenician alphabet itself may have been adopted by others like the Greeks, not through formal teaching, but because it was a practical tool seen in use in bustling port cities, a far more efficient system for keeping trade records than the complex scripts of the time. Their greatest export wasn't a thing, but an idea, and it spread through commerce, not conquest. So how do we possibly map these invisible highways of ancient exchange? Historians and archaeologists become detectives of material culture, tracing the movement of objects that could only have arrived in a place through long-distance contact. A simple shell necklace found hundreds of miles inland from the nearest coast tells a clear story of trade routes. The discovery of obsidian, a volcanic glass used for razor-sharp tools, can be chemically fingerprinted to trace it back to its specific source volcano, revealing networks that stretched for thousands of miles. Distinctive art styles are another powerful clue. The sudden appearance of jade carvings in a style originating from a distant culture, or the adoption of a specific pottery shape, signals a connection, an exchange of not just goods but aesthetic values. By patiently piecing together these clues, a picture emerges not of isolated, primitive tribes, but of a surprisingly interconnected ancient world. A farmer in what is now Germany might be using a sickle made from Italian bronze, while a chieftain in Britain might be buried with amber beads from the Baltic Sea. These silent civilizations were not closed-off worlds. They were nodes in a vast global network, engaged in a constant, quiet conversation conducted through the language of objects. And it is through interpreting the meaning behind those objects, the symbols they carried, that we begin to hear the whispers of their deepest beliefs and values. Imagine trying to understand a complex idea, a deeply held belief, or an entire cultural identity without a single word of explanation. This is the fundamental challenge we face with these silent civilizations. Without written records, their most profound thoughts are not captured in sentences but encoded in a visual language of symbols and iconography. To understand them, we must learn to read this language, to decipher the meaning behind the images they left behind on pottery, on stone, and on the very landscape itself. This is not a straightforward translation. It is an act of interpretive archaeology, a delicate dance between evidence and imagination, where a single symbol can open a window into an entire worldview. Take, for instance, the enigmatic Nazca Lines in Peru. From the ground, they are little more than shallow grooves in the desert floor, but from above, they resolve into a breathtaking gallery of gigantic spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, and geometric shapes stretching for miles. The sheer scale of these geoglyphs is a statement in itself, but what were they saying? One prevailing theory suggests they functioned as a massive astronomical calendar, their alignments marking key solar and celestial events crucial for an agricultural society to track seasons and water cycles. The spider, for example, might be a representation of the constellation Orion, while the monkey could be linked to the Pleiades star cluster, both of which held significance for Andean cultures. Another compelling idea is that they formed a ritual pathway, a sacred landscape to be walked during ceremonies, perhaps to invoke the deities associated with water and fertility in an incredibly arid environment. The lines might have been a form of prayer, a desperate and beautiful plea to the gods, written not on papyrus but on the parchment of the earth itself. The fact that the creators could never see the full glory of their work only deepens the mystery, suggesting these messages were intended for a higher audience, making the desert a vast temple under the open sky. On the remote island of Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, another set of silent symbols tells a different story. The massive moai statues, with their solemn, elongated faces and heavy brows, are the island's most famous feature, but it is the intricate carvings on their backs that often go unnoticed. These petroglyphs depict symbols like the komri, a vulva form representing fertility and the continuity of life, and the double-bladed paddle or ow, a symbol of chiefly power and authority. The statues themselves, placed on ceremonial platforms called ahu that often contain burials, are believed to represent deified ancestors. Each moai was not merely a sculpture, it was a permanent stone embodiment of a powerful lineage, watching over the community and channeling spiritual energy, or mana, to the living. The iconography carved into them reinforces this role, connecting the power of the ancestors to the fundamental forces of life and social order. The symbols are a concise visual language stating power, lineage, and the hope for prosperity, all without a single written word. This process of decoding is not done in isolation. Archaeologists and anthropologists often look for patterns across cultures and time periods. They identify recurring motifs that seem to tap into universal human experiences. The spiral, for example, appears in the megalithic art of Newgrange in Ireland, on Minoan pottery from Crete, and in the rock art of indigenous Australians. It is often interpreted as a symbol of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, or of the journey of the sun. A handprint stenciled on a cave wall in France or Argentina is a powerful, immediate symbol of human presence, an ancient "I was here" that transcends language. The prevalence of certain animals like the bull, representing raw power and fertility across ancient Europe, and the Mediterranean suggests shared ways of conceptualizing the natural world and humanity's place within it. Of course, this work is inherently subjective. We can never be entirely certain that our modern interpretation of a spiral matches the intention of a Neolithic artist 5,000 years ago. We risk projecting our own biases and cultural frameworks onto people who may have seen the world in a radically different way. Yet, this interpretive work is not guesswork, it is a rigorous methodology. Researchers cross-reference symbols with archaeological context, what was found nearby, how the symbol was used, what it was painted on or carved into. They look for patterns in placement and repetition. This careful, critical analysis allows them to build compelling, evidence-based arguments about what these visual messages meant to the people who created them. It is our best chance to hear the whispers of their values, their fears, and their hopes, allowing us to understand that their silence was not an emptiness, but a different way of speaking, one that used the eloquent vocabulary of symbol and form to discuss the most important aspects of human existence. And these symbols of belief and identity were ultimately reflections of the people themselves, of how they organized their societies and structured their daily lives. Without written laws or bureaucratic records, the very fabric of social order in these silent civilizations had to be woven from different threads of shared ritual, collective memory, and the physical layout of daily life. To understand how they governed themselves, we must become architectural detectives and funerary anthropologists, reading the stories told by their houses and their graves. One of the most fascinating and debated examples comes from one of the world's earliest known large settlements, Çatalhöyük in Turkey. This Neolithic town, dating back over 9,000 years, presents a startlingly unique urban plan. There are no grand palaces, no central temples, no obvious main streets or public squares. Instead, the community was a dense honeycomb of mud brick houses, each one nearly identical to the next, packed so tightly together that people moved across the settlement by walking over the rooftops and entering their homes through holes in the ceiling. The interiors reveal a fascinating domestic life with platforms for sleeping and working, and walls adorned with elaborate paintings, sculptures of animals, and even embedded bull skulls. But strikingly, the evidence points to a remarkable degree of social equality. While some houses have slightly more elaborate art than others, there is no evidence of a ruling elite class. There are no vastly larger homes for chiefs, no storehouses hoarding wealth for a few. This has led many archaeologists to speculate that Çatalhöyük was organized in a fundamentally egalitarian way, perhaps through networks of extended families or clans who made decisions collectively. Leadership might have been situational, deferring to the best hunter, the most skilled artisan, or the most spiritually knowledgeable elder as the need arose, rather than investing permanent, heritable power in a single ruler. Their governance was likely embedded in the daily rhythms of kinship and shared ritual, not written on tablets but enacted in the very design of their shared existence. Now contrast that with the breathtaking uniformity of the Indus Valley civilization. Here, across a vast region encompassing over 1 million square kilometers, we see a level of standardization that is simply astounding. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, separated by hundreds of miles, were built using the same precise grid pattern for their streets. They used identical, standardized mud bricks in a perfect ratio of 4:2:1. Their weights and measures were so consistent that a cube from one city is indistinguishable from a cube found in another. This doesn't happen by accident. This degree of coordination implies a powerful, centralized form of planning and control. Someone or some group had the authority to dictate these standards and ensure they were implemented across a huge and diverse landscape. Yet the mystery deepens because we cannot find them. There are no grand royal palaces, no giant statues of kings, no opulent tombs filled with treasure that scream of a powerful, egotistical ruler. This has led to one of the great enduring puzzles of archaeology: who was in charge? The leading theory suggests that the Indus Valley might have been governed by a unique form of oligarchy, perhaps a council of elite merchants, high priests, or a bureaucracy of administrators who derived their authority from control over trade, religion, or water resources rather than military might. Their power was expressed not through self-glorifying monuments, but through the smooth, efficient, and orderly functioning of the city itself. The governance was implicit in the perfect brick, the covered drain, the well-organized warehouse. It was a power that served the community's function but left no individual's name behind. For the most direct evidence of social hierarchy, we often look to how a society treats its dead. Burial customs are a universal window into the values and structure of the living. In many silent cultures, graves speak louder than any written proclamation of rank ever could. Across Neolithic Europe, for example, we find dramatic contrasts. There are simple pit burials with a single pot as a grave good, suggesting the resting place of an ordinary farmer or craftsperson. And then there are the spectacular megalithic tombs, like the magnificent Passage grave at Newgrange in Ireland, which took an enormous collective effort to build and was designed to hold the remains of a select few. Inside these tombs, archaeologists often find exotic goods, polished stone axes made from jadate sourced from the Alps, beautiful shell necklaces from distant coastlines, and finely crafted pottery. These were items that required immense skill to make or involved long-distance trade networks to acquire. Their presence in a single tomb is a clear statement. This individual was important. They had access to wealth, knowledge, and power that others did not. This doesn't necessarily mean they were tyrants. They could have been revered leaders, spiritual figures, or heads of powerful lineages. But the grave goods undeniably mark a stratified society, one with a clear elite and a broader population. The social order was communicated and reinforced through the powerful, silent theater of burial, a ritual that reminded everyone of their place in the hierarchy and the authority of those who led them. This brings us back to the builders of the great stone circles and megalithic monuments. The construction of a site like Stonehenge was a breathtaking logistical endeavor, requiring the coordinated labor of thousands of people over many generations. How was this achieved without a written project plan or a centralized king issuing commands? The answer likely lies in a different model of power, collective action driven by a shared belief system. The motivation to build these celestial calendars and communal tombs would have been deeply woven into the religious and social fabric of the culture. It was probably not a top-down command but a bottom-up collective endeavor. Different kinship groups or villages may have taken responsibility for different phases of the project as a form of ritual duty or a way to gain prestige within a broader community. Decision-making could have been achieved through consensus during seasonal gatherings and festivals. The leaders in such a society might have been those who could persuade, organize, and mediate those with ritual knowledge or a perceived connection to the ancestors, rather than those who commanded armies. Their authority was earned and granted by the community for a specific, sacred purpose. This shows us that complex, large-scale society does not automatically require coercive, centralized power. It can be built and sustained through shared ideology, cooperative ritual, and a common vision that binds people together far more effectively than any written law. This intricate social tapestry, woven from threads of equality, hierarchy, and collective belief, provided the foundation upon which they built their most enduring legacies, and it naturally leads us to wonder what powerful spiritual forces provided the glue that held it all together. If architecture was the skeleton of these silent societies and trade their circulatory system, then religion and spirituality were the very heart that gave them life and purpose. For civilizations without a written creed or holy book, the divine was not something to be read about, but something to be experienced, enacted, and embodied in the world around them. Their entire landscape became a sacred text, and their most profound rituals were their way of communing with the forces that governed their existence. This deep, pervasive spirituality was the ultimate unifying force, the shared belief system that could motivate a community to move mountains of stone and align their lives with the cosmos itself. We see this drive most spectacularly in the human impulse to build towards the heavens. The pyramids of ancient Egypt are the classic example, though the Egyptians had writing. Their true power lies in the fact that this same impulse appears independently in pre-literate cultures across the globe. In Mesoamerica, centuries before the Maya developed their complex script, civilizations like the Olmecs were constructing massive earthen pyramids. These were not tombs, as in Egypt, but elevated platforms for temples, places to physically and symbolically bring the priests closer to the realm of the gods. The act of building such a structure was in itself a monumental act of devotion, a collective project that required every member of the community to contribute their labor for a higher cause. The pyramid was a symbolic mountain, a axis mundi, a central point connecting the earthly world with the celestial and underworld realms below. By building it, they were quite literally constructing a portal to the divine, anchoring their world to a cosmic order. This desire to physically manifest a connection to the cosmos is perhaps even more beautifully articulated at a place like Newgrange in Ireland. This 5,000-year-old passage tomb is not merely a burial mound. It is a meticulously engineered astronomical instrument made of stone and earth. Once a year, at dawn on the winter solstice, the shortest and darkest day of the year, a precisely engineered roof box above the entrance captures the rising sun. A narrow beam of light penetrates the long, dark passageway, flooding the inner chamber with golden light for a breathtaking 17 minutes before receding back into darkness. This was not a happy accident. It was a feat of incredible intention, requiring generations of precise observation of the sun's cycles. For the Neolithic farmers who built it, this event was surely rich with meaning. It represented the triumph of light over darkness, the promise of the sun's return, and the rebirth of the new year. It connected the world of the living, outside in the cold, with the world of the ancestors buried within the chamber, all united by the life-giving power of the sun. The ritual, the astronomy, and the architecture were all one inseparable whole, a complete spiritual practice written in stone and light. To understand the nature of their beliefs, archaeologists must become interpreters of a silent liturgy. They carefully excavate the remains of rituals, piecing together practices from what was left behind. The layout of a temple, for example, can reveal the choreography of worship. A central altar, a secluded inner sanctum, and public courtyards suggest a hierarchy of access to the sacred, with priests mediating between the people and the gods. The artifacts found within these spaces speak volumes. Caches of ceremonial objects, exquisitely carved jade figurines, polished mirrors of iron ore, or beautifully painted pots, were likely offerings to deities or ancestors, gifts given in hope of reciprocity, rain for crops, success in hunting, or healthy children. In more extreme cases, the discovery of sacrificial offerings provides a stark, sometimes unsettling window into the depth of their convictions. The finding of carefully arranged animal skeletons, or in some societies, human remains, points to a belief that the most powerful offerings required the most valuable possessions, life itself. This wasn't mere brutality. It was likely rooted in a profound cosmological idea that life required life to sustain it, that the energy of a sacrificed being could nourish the gods and ensure the continued cycle of the seasons and the stability of the world. These practices, though difficult for us to comprehend, underscore how deeply these spiritual beliefs were woven into their understanding of how the universe functioned. It was a contractual relationship with the divine, maintained through ritual action. Ultimately, this spiritual framework provided the essential glue that held these societies together. A shared belief system gave everyone a common purpose and a place in a meaningful cosmos. It justified the social order, explained the mysteries of life and death, and provided comfort in the face of hardship. The collective labor of building a pyramid or a stone circle was not back-breaking drudgery. It was an act of faith, a way to earn spiritual merit and contribute to the community's well-being. Their beliefs shaped every aspect of their world, from the grandest temple alignment down to the design of a common household pot adorned with a sacred symbol. Though their prayers and chants have been lost to the wind, the enduring stones they left behind stand as a permanent testament to the universal human need to seek connection, find meaning, and reach for something greater than ourselves. This deep spiritual current powered their greatest achievements and structured their most profound institutions, but it was all in service of the most human of experiences, the daily struggle and joy of simply making a life. While the grand monuments and mysterious symbols capture our imagination, the true story of these silent civilizations is written in the humble, everyday objects they left behind. To understand them, we must look past the soaring pyramids and silent stone circles and into the quiet details of domestic life. The grinding stones worn smooth by years of milling grain, the bone needles used to stitch warm clothing, the fragments of pottery that once held a family's meal. These are the artifacts that whisper the most intimate truths about how people lived, loved, and labored to sustain themselves in a world without modern conveniences. Their daily existence was a masterclass in adaptation, a continuous negotiation with their environment that required deep, generational knowledge and resilient ingenuity. For them, survival was not a given. It was a hard-won achievement, and their strategies for securing food and shelter formed the bedrock upon which their entire culture was built. Consider the remarkable ingenuity of the ancestral Pueblones in the arid American Southwest. In a landscape of canyons and mesas where water was a precious and unpredictable resource, they became brilliant hydrological engineers and botanists. They didn't just farm, they engineered their environment to maximize every drop of rain. They built intricate check dams and diversion channels to capture scarce runoff from brief desert storms, channeling it to their fields. They developed drought-resistant strains of corn, beans, and squash that could thrive in poor soil with minimal water. Their famous cliff dwellings, like those at Mesa Verde, were more than just dramatic architecture. They were a strategic choice, positioning their homes in south-facing alcoves that captured the winter sun for warmth and were naturally shielded from the intense summer heat. Every aspect of their daily life, from the design of their homes to the crops they cultivated, was a direct and sophisticated response to the challenges of their environment. Their story is not one of mere survival, but of flourishing against the odds through careful observation and innovation. On the opposite extreme of the planet, another culture developed an entirely different but equally brilliant suite of survival strategies. The Dorset people, a Paleo-Eskimo culture that thrived in the Arctic from around 500 BC to 1500 CE, faced a world defined by ice, cold, and a fleeting summer. Their entire subsistence strategy was built around mastering the maritime environment. They were not farmers, they were superlative hunters of the sea. Their toolkits, exquisitely crafted from bone, ivory, and stone, reveal their specialty. They crafted sleek, counterweighted harpoons designed to hunt seals at their breathing holes in the ice, a technique requiring immense patience and skill. They also hunted larger prey like walruses and narwhals from small, skin-covered boats. Their ingenuity extended to their homes. They built semi-subterranean winter houses with long, tunnel-like entrances to trap cold air and keep the living space warm, using soapstone lamps burning seal oil for light and heat. For the Dorset, understanding the migration patterns of animals, the movements of sea ice, and the changing of the seasons was a matter of life and death. Their knowledge was their library, passed down through generations not in books, but through demonstration, story, and shared experience on the hunt. These subsistence strategies were never just about filling bellies. They were the very engine of social and economic life. The act of harvesting, processing, and storing food was a central rhythm that structured the day, the season, and the year. The discovery of large, communal storage pits at archaeological sites tells us that planning for scarcity was a collective effort. A surplus of grain or dried meat allowed for specialization, freeing up some individuals to become full-time potters, toolmakers, weavers, or religious leaders. The types of tools found in a dwelling can reveal a family's role within the larger community. A home filled with fine obsidian flakes and unfinished projectile points might have been the workshop of a respected flint knapper, whose products were traded for food or other goods. Another dwelling with multiple grinding stones and large storage jars might indicate a family that specialized in processing grain for the wider group. This intricate web of interdependence, all built upon a foundation of successful subsistence, is what allowed these societies to move beyond mere survival and develop the complex social structures that could eventually organize the building of a Stonehenge or a pyramid. By reconstructing these daily routines from the fragments they left behind, we do more than just study ancient economics. We humanize these distant people, connecting with their struggles and their triumphs on a profoundly personal level. Among the silent stones and buried foundations, we find some of the most intimate clues about these vanished people, not in grand proclamations, but in the quiet details of how they organized their families and divided the work of daily life. Without written records, we must become forensic sociologists, piecing together the structure of their societies from the objects they cherished in death and the layouts of the spaces they inhabited in life. The evidence reveals a world far more nuanced and varied than the simplistic stereotypes of cavemen and primitive tribes, showing us societies that adapted their social rules to their environment in remarkably sophisticated ways. One of the most compelling sources of evidence comes from the way people were buried. The goods placed alongside an individual in their grave are rarely random. They are a powerful statement about that person's identity, role, and status within the community. Across Neolithic Europe, archaeologists have uncovered graves of men buried with polished stone axes, finely crafted flint arrowheads, and other hunting weaponry. These warrior graves suggest a social role tied to hunting, defense, and potentially a form of leadership rooted in physical prowess or protection. This points to a society where male status was often, though not always, linked to these activities, but to assume all ancient societies followed this model would be a profound mistake. In stark contrast, many graves from the same period tell a completely different story. There are numerous burials of women interred with exquisite jewelry made from rare seashells or amber that had been traded across vast distances, as well as finely decorated pottery and weaving tools. These were not merely personal ornaments, they were symbols of wealth, connections, and high social standing. In some cultures, like the linear pottery culture of Central Europe, women were often buried with these prestigious goods more frequently than men, suggesting that wealth and status could be inherited through the female line in a matrilineal system. This evidence forces us to abandon a one-size-fits-all view of the past and instead accept a tapestry of diverse social structures. This complexity is further illuminated by the discovery of small, portable art, particularly the so-called Venus figurines found from France to Siberia. These statuettes, carved from stone or ivory during the Upper Paleolithic period, overwhelmingly depict women, often with exaggerated features associated with fertility and childbirth. While their exact meaning is debated, their prevalence suggests that female fertility and the power to create new life were not just biological facts but central, revered cultural concepts. It is plausible that in some of these societies, kinship and group identity were traced through the mother, with family membership and inheritance passing from mother to daughter. In such a matrilineal system, women would have held significant social and economic power as the anchors of the family line and the conduits of cultural knowledge. This stands in sharp contrast to the later, more familiar patriarchal systems of the ancient world with written records, reminding us that the path of human social organization has not been a straight, predetermined line. Beyond the symbolic, the hard evidence of daily labor also speaks volumes. By analyzing skeletal remains with modern scientific techniques, bioarchaeologists can literally read the physical toll of a person's life in their bones. They find distinct patterns of wear and tear that correlate strongly with different types of work. On some male skeletons, we see the telltale signs of a life of hunting and violence, healed fractures from close-quarters combat, repetitive stress injuries from throwing spears, and arthritis in the shoulders from drawing powerful bows. On the bones of many women, we find a different signature of labor, significant arthritis in the knees and lower back from hours spent grinding grain on stone querns, and distinctive wear patterns on the teeth from repeatedly chewing animal hides to soften them for leatherworking. These are not assumptions, they are physical records of a lifetime of work etched into the skeleton itself. This division of labor was likely not about oppression, but about pragmatic adaptation and efficiency within a community. The physical strength required for hunting large game or defending the group often fell to men, while the sustained, meticulous work of food processing, childcare, and crafting essential goods like pottery and clothing often fell to women. However, these roles were almost certainly not rigid cages. There would have been exceptions, overlaps, and tasks shared by all. The key insight is that this division was a practical response to the immense challenge of survival. It was a cooperative system where each person's contribution, whether hunting a mammoth or tanning its hide to make clothing, was essential for the entire group's survival. This intricate dance of cooperation, rooted in the practicalities of life rather than written laws, allowed these silent civilizations to not only endure, but to build the foundations upon which all future societies would stand. Beyond the grand monuments and the practical tools of survival, perhaps the most intimate connection we can forge with these silent civilizations is through their art. This is where their worldviews, their fears, their joys, and their deepest beliefs were given form, creating a visual language that speaks across the millennia with a clarity that often feels personal and immediate. The breathtaking ochre and charcoal paintings that adorn the walls of the Lascaux cave in France are a perfect example. Created over 17,000 years ago, these are not simple doodles. They are dynamic, powerful depictions of bison, horses, and stags, rendered with an understanding of anatomy and movement that would impress a modern artist. The animals seem to breathe and gallop across the rock face, their power captured in swift, confident lines. But why were they made deep within a lightless cavern, a place of danger and difficulty? This was likely not a casual art gallery but a sacred space, a place for ritual where a shaman or an initiate might have sought to connect with the spirit of the hunt to ensure success, or to tell the story of their people's relationship with the powerful creatures they relied upon for survival. The art was functional, a vital part of their spiritual and cultural practice, and its enduring beauty is a testament to a universal human need to create and to make meaning. On the other side of the world, and thousands of years later, a different kind of artistic expression reveals a different set of cultural priorities. the Liangzhu culture, which flourished in China around 5,300 years ago, left behind a legacy of exquisite jade carvings. Jade is an incredibly tough stone, difficult to work even with modern metal tools. The fact that the Liangzhu artisans mastered it using only abrasive, sand, and patience is a staggering technical achievement. But the true significance lies in the objects they created, most notably the Kong, a cylindrical tube with a square outer section, and the Bai, a flat disc with a hole in the center. These were not mere ornaments, they were ritual objects of profound symbolic importance, often found buried in large quantities with elite members of society. The precise meaning of their forms is debated, but many scholars believe the Kong represents the earth with its square shape, while the Bai symbolizes the heavens, its circular form echoing the sky. Together, they express a cosmology, a belief in a universe ordered by complementary forces. The intricate, almost microscopic designs of stylized faces and patterns carved into the jade further reinforce this, acting as a symbolic language that communicated status, power, and a shared spiritual identity. The immense effort invested in these objects shows that for the Liangzhu, beauty, ritual, and political power were inextricably linked, all expressed through the demanding medium of jade. This concept of art as a cultural signature is powerfully illustrated by the pottery of the Mimbres culture in what is now the American Southwest. Between the years 1000 and 1150, Mimbres potters created stunning black on white bowls decorated with a mesmerizing array of designs. Some feature incredibly intricate geometric patterns, precise and hypnotic in their repetition. Others break into the realm of storytelling, depicting scenes from daily life and mythology, rabbits being hunted, fish swimming, and most famously, a human figure seemingly emerging from a tadpole, possibly representing a creation story or a spiritual transformation. What is particularly fascinating is the deliberate kill hole, often ritually punched in the bottom of these bowls when they were interred with the dead. This act suggests the vessel was not just a container but a possessed object, its spirit released to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. The style of these paintings is so distinct that when a piece of Mimbres pottery is found hundreds of miles from its source, archaeologists can immediately identify it, tracing networks of trade and influence across the ancient desert. The pot itself becomes a messenger, its design a clear statement of cultural affiliation and belief, long after the name of the culture itself had been forgotten. This incredible diversity of artistic expression, from the vibrant cave paintings of France to the serene jade discs of China and the narrative pottery of the American Southwest, all points to a single, profound truth. The impulse to create beauty, to impose order on chaos, and to communicate complex ideas through symbol and form is a fundamental part of what makes us human. It does not require literacy, it predates it by tens of thousands of years. These artists were not primitive, they were masters of their chosen media, using their skills to explore the biggest questions of existence: our relationship with nature, our place in the cosmos, and the mystery of life and death. Their work connects us to them on a level that feels direct and emotional. We can look at a Mimbres rabbit and appreciate the humor and skill of the painter. We can hold a Liangzhu Kong and feel the cool weight of its spiritual significance. This art is their unwritten history, a soulful record of laughter, fear, wonder, and belief, reminding us that our shared humanity is the most powerful legacy of all. Yet for all their resilience across millennia, the physical legacies of these silent cultures now face an array of modern threats more relentless than any they ever encountered in their own time. The very sites that have weathered centuries of natural decay are now under assault from the accelerating pressures of the contemporary world. Looting remains a devastating problem, as thieves illegally dig at archaeological sites to plunder artifacts for the illicit antiquities market, ruthlessly destroying the delicate contextual layers that give those objects their true historical meaning in the process. Each looted pot or stolen figurine isn't just a loss of an item. It's a page ripped from a book we can never read again, severing the connection between an artifact and the story it was meant to tell. Perhaps even more insidious are the pervasive threats of climate change and urbanization. Rising sea levels are eroding coastal sites, while increased frequency of droughts and floods on land destabilizes ancient structures and buries them under new layers of sediment or erosion. The expansion of cities and agriculture steadily paves over the past, literally concretizing our shared heritage beneath highways and housing developments. These forces create a race against time, an urgent mandate to find, document, and protect these fragile sites before they are lost forever. But the great promise of our era is that just as these challenges have grown, so too have the tools to combat them, ushering in a golden age of non-invasive archaeological discovery. Leading this revolution is a technology called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine being able to strip away an entire rainforest canopy or a dense layer of undergrowth with the push of a button, revealing the hidden geometry of the landscape beneath. That is precisely what LiDAR does. Mounted on airplanes or drones, the system fires millions of laser pulses toward the ground. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, it constructs an exquisitely detailed three-dimensional map of the surface below. This technology has completely transformed our understanding of sites in places like Cambodia and Central America. At the ancient Khmer city of Angkor, once thought to be a scattered collection of temples, LiDAR revealed a vast, low-density urban metropolis with canals, roads, and neighborhoods, completely rewriting the history of Southeast Asia's greatest empire. In the jungles of Guatemala, it unveiled thousands of previously unknown Maya structures, including fortifications and complex irrigation systems, showing a civilization far more populous and interconnected than anyone had imagined. All of this was achieved without ever breaking ground, preserving the sites in their pristine state for future, more careful study. Complementing this bird's eye view is the power of photogrammetry and 3D modeling, which allows us to create perfect digital twins of artifacts and monuments. Using hundreds of overlapping photographs, specialized software can build a high-resolution, three-dimensional model of an object that can be rotated, measured, and studied from every angle. This is a game-changer for both preservation and access. A fragile sculpture can be digitally archived before it further deteriorates, ensuring its form is preserved even if the original is lost. More importantly, these models can be shared online with researchers across the globe and with the public, democratizing access to our collective heritage. Anyone with an internet connection can now take a virtual tour of an Egyptian tomb or examine a prehistoric tool from their living room, fostering a deeper global connection to these ancient stories. The scientific analysis of the remains themselves has also undergone a quantum leap, where archaeologists once could only guess at the age of a bone or a piece of charcoal. Radiocarbon dating now provides precise calendars for the past. Even more profound is the field of paleogenomics, the study of ancient DNA. From a tiny fragment of bone or a well-preserved tooth, scientists can now extract genetic material that is thousands of years old. This allows them to answer questions that were once pure speculation. By analyzing the DNA from skeletal remains, researchers can trace ancient migration patterns, understanding how populations moved and mixed across continents. They can diagnose diseases an individual suffered from, understand their diet from the bacteria in their teeth, and even determine familial relationships between people buried in the same grave. This biological data adds an incredibly intimate layer to the archaeological record, moving us from broad cultural labels to understanding the health, ancestry, and kinship of specific individuals, giving names in a sense to those who left none behind. All of this digitally born data, the LiDAR maps, the 3D models, the genetic sequences, creates a new kind of archive, one that is immune to the physical decay that threatens the original sites. Digital storage ensures the longevity of this information, allowing it to be continuously reanalyzed as new scientific techniques emerge. Future generations of researchers will be able to interrogate this digital record with tools we haven't even invented yet, extracting new stories from the same silent stones. This commitment to preservation, using every tool at our disposal, is a testament to the immense value we now place on these fragile clues. It is a global acknowledgement that these silent legacies are not the property of a single nation, but a vital chapter in the story of all humanity, and their protection is a duty we all share as we move forward to consider the profound ethical responsibilities that come with this powerful knowledge. But as our tools for uncovering the past grow more powerful, we are also grappling with a much deeper and more human question. Just because we can excavate a site, does it always mean we should? The pursuit of knowledge about silent civilizations is no longer a simple, neutral science conducted in a vacuum. It is an endeavor deeply intertwined with profound ethical considerations about ownership, respect, and the very right to control one's own narrative. For centuries, archaeology was often an extension of colonialism, with explorers from wealthy Western nations extracting artifacts and human remains from other countries to fill distant museums, treating ancient cultures as curiosities to be collected and dissected rather than as legacies to be honored. This history casts a long shadow, and the field is now engaged in a vital and necessary reckoning with its own practices, recognizing that the silent stones of the past are often directly connected to the living, breathing communities of the present. Perhaps the most sensitive ethical frontier lies in the treatment of human remains and sacred burial sites. For many indigenous and descendant communities around the world, these are not merely archaeological specimens. They are ancestors whose spirits must be allowed to rest in peace. The act of unearthing them, measuring their bones, and placing them on display in glass museum cases is not seen as science, but as a profound desecration and a continuation of historical trauma. This conflict came to a head in the United States with the passage of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, in 1990. This landmark legislation forced museums and universities to inventory their collections of Native American human remains and cultural items, and to work with tribes to repatriate them for reburial according to their own customs. This process has been complex and sometimes contentious, but it represents a crucial shift in power, acknowledging that the living descendants of these cultures are the rightful stewards of their ancestors' legacy. It establishes a vital principle that scientific curiosity must be balanced with, and often yield to, cultural respect and religious belief. Beyond the physical remains, there is the equally complex challenge of interpretation. When we attempt to decipher the meaning behind a silent civilization's symbols, architecture, or rituals, we inevitably risk projecting our own modern, Western biases onto people who may have viewed the world in a radically different way. A perfect example is the long-standing interpretation of the Great Palace at Knossos on Crete. Early archaeologists, steeped in their own cultural context, interpreted the complex as a seat of a powerful king, a Minoan palace ruled by a figure like the later King Minos of myth. This interpretation went largely unchallenged for decades. However, a growing number of contemporary scholars, many of them women, have re-examined the evidence. The abundance of frescoes depicting women in prominent roles, the lack of overt military imagery, the presence of symbols like the double-headed axe or labrys, which may be linked to female power, and have proposed a very different theory. They suggest that Minoan society might have been far more matriarchal or gynocentric, with a powerful priestess class playing a leading role in religious and political life. This isn't about politically correct revisionism. It's about recognizing how the assumptions of the initial interpreters can shape a narrative for a century, and how opening the field to diverse voices can lead to dramatically new and potentially more accurate understandings. This is where the most promising development in modern archaeology emerges: the move toward collaborative, community-based research. This approach fundamentally changes the dynamic. Instead of a team of outside experts arriving with a preconceived plan, they begin by building relationships with local and descendant communities. They ask for guidance, listen to oral histories, and incorporate indigenous knowledge into every stage of the process, from choosing which sites to investigate to deciding how the findings will be shared and preserved. When archaeologists work alongside the Hopi tribe in the American Southwest, for instance, they are not just learning about pottery styles, they are understanding the spiritual significance of the landscape and the continuous cultural practices that have endured for 1,000 years. This collaboration leads to more nuanced and accurate interpretations. It ensures that the stories being told about the past are not just scientifically sound, but are also culturally respectful and meaningful to the people for whom that past is not a mystery, but a living identity. This ethical framework transforms archaeology from a one-way extraction of knowledge into a dialogue, a partnership that honors the past by respecting the present. The enduring allure of these silent builders is far more than a historical curiosity. It has actively seeped into the very fabric of our modern creative and intellectual consciousness. Their enigmatic stories and breathtaking achievements provide a boundless source of inspiration, fueling everything from blockbuster films and best-selling novels to ambitious architectural projects and even the outer fringes of alternative history. The very mystery surrounding them creates a vacuum that our imagination rushes to fill. We see this in the persistent and popular myth of Atlantis, a story first told by Plato that has been endlessly reimagined as a technologically advanced civilization lost to the sea. Its legend undoubtedly sparked by real, fragmentary memories of cultures like the Minoans who were devastated by volcanic eruptions and tsunamis. Similarly, the sheer scale and precision of the pyramids at Giza have given rise to countless conspiracy theories about ancient astronauts or lost super technologies, theories that, while debunked by mainstream archaeology, speak to a deep public fascination with how such wonders could be achieved without the tools we take for granted today. This captivation isn't merely about spectacle. It's a profound human response to the puzzle of our own potential, a wondering about paths not taken and knowledge perhaps lost. Beyond the realm of fiction and speculation, the practical genius of these cultures is increasingly recognized as a vital source of wisdom for contemporary challenges. The architectural feats of the Inca are a prime example. Their stunning stonework, assembled without mortar yet surviving centuries in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, is now studied by engineers and architects for its principles of sustainability and resilience. The way their structures dance during an earthquake before settling back into place is a masterclass in seismic design that modern construction is only beginning to fully appreciate. This ancient technology, born of necessity and deep observation, offers a blueprint for building in harmony with natural forces rather than attempting to simply overpower them. Furthermore, the sophisticated terracing and water management systems developed by the Inca and other ancient agricultural societies are being re-examined as models for sustainable farming in an era of climate change, demonstrating how to cultivate difficult terrain without causing widespread environmental degradation. Their legacy is not locked in the past, it is a living library of adaptive innovation. On a deeper, more philosophical level, the silent civilizations hold up a mirror to our own society, forcing us to confront fundamental questions about longevity, resilience, and what truly defines a civilization's success. Their sudden declines, often linked to environmental overexploitation or an inability to adapt to changing climates, serve as sobering cautionary tales. The story of Easter Island, where a thriving culture arguably contributed to its own downfall through deforestation and resource depletion, has become a powerful parable for our global ecological predicament. Studying these collapses provides a crucial long-term perspective, reminding us that no society, no matter how technologically advanced or seemingly secure, is immune to the consequences of its relationship with the natural world. Conversely, their incredible periods of stability, some lasting far longer than our entire modern era, offer lessons in social cohesion and cultural endurance. They challenge our modern bias that equates progress solely with constant technological acceleration and growth, suggesting that resilience might also be found in stability, in community-based decision-making, and in a spiritual connection to the land. By examining their strengths and their vulnerabilities, we gain invaluable insight into our own, helping us to identify which pillars of our society are truly sturdy and which might be built on sand. This enduring fascination ultimately shows that a legacy does not require written proclamations or carved records of kings. The most powerful legacies are those woven into the landscape, encoded in stone, and passed down through the silent language of adaptation and ingenuity. These cultures speak volumes about human potential not through words but through action and achievement. They demonstrate that complexity, spirituality, and a rich inner life can flourish without libraries, that a society can be organized and magnificent without glorifying individual autocrats, and that communication can be profound without a single decipherable syllable. Their silent stones ask us to listen differently, to value different kinds of knowledge, and to consider the possibility that some of the most important chapters of the human story were written not on parchment, but in the relationship between a community and its world. This reflection on their broad influence naturally pulls our focus toward the specific, tantalizing questions that remain wide open, the unsolved mysteries that continue to beckon and frustrate researchers in equal measure. Even with all our advanced technology and centuries of careful study, the silent builders guard their most profound secrets closely, leaving us with a series of captivating puzzles that continue to spark fierce debate and drive archaeological inquiry forward. Consider the sudden and complete disappearance of the Clovis culture in North America. These people were once considered the continent's first widespread inhabitants, renowned for their distinctive, fluted spear points used to hunt massive megafauna like mammoths and mastodons. Then, around 12,900 years ago, at a time of significant climate upheaval, their signature tools vanish from the archaeological record. The prevailing theory for decades pointed to a phenomenon known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which suggests a comet or asteroid exploded in the atmosphere above North America, triggering a rapid return to Ice Age conditions. This climatic shift, the theory goes, would have decimated the large game animals the Clovis people relied on, leading to their collapse, but this idea is hotly contested. Other researchers argue there is scant evidence for such an impact and propose that the Clovis culture didn't vanish but simply evolved, their tool-making techniques adapting and changing over time as they shifted to hunting smaller game and utilizing a wider variety of resources. The truth remains elusive, a reminder that even a relatively recent prehistoric event can be incredibly difficult to decipher without a written account. The fate of Easter Island society is another mystery that has morphed from a simple cautionary tale into a complex archaeological drama. The classic narrative is an ecological parable, a society so obsessed with erecting its massive stone moai that it chopped down every last tree to use as rollers and levers, leading to catastrophic soil erosion, the collapse of its agricultural base, and a descent into warfare and cannibalism. This story of self-inflicted ecocide has long been used as a microcosm for our own planetary struggles. However, newer evidence is painting a more nuanced and perhaps even more tragic picture. While deforestation certainly occurred, it may not have been the sole villain. The arrival of Europeans brought devastating diseases to which the islanders had no immunity. Worse still, the Peruvian slave raids of the 1860s kidnapped and killed thousands, nearly wiping out the population and severing the transmission of oral history forever. The real story of Rapa Nui's decline appears to be a heartbreaking collision of internal environmental pressures and external, catastrophic human violence. The debate continues not just about what happened, but about how we use these stories, whether we simplify them into moral fables or embrace their complex, uncomfortable truths. Perhaps the most fundamental and frustrating debates rage over the very nature of the communication these cultures left behind. The line between abstract art and a true writing system is often blurry, and nowhere is this more evident than with the Indus Valley script. The 4,000 inscribed objects found across the civilization's territory are covered in a series of consistent, recurring symbols, from fish and birds to abstract shapes. Do these sequences represent a language, encoding the words and grammar of the Indus people? Or are they merely non-linguistic symbols denoting family names, religious concepts, or political titles? A form of proto-writing rather than a full-blown script. Despite numerous attempts to decipher it, including the use of modern computational linguistics and AI pattern recognition, the code remains unbroken. The main obstacle is the sheer brevity of the inscriptions. Most are only 4 or 5 symbols long, offering no lengthy text to analyze for patterns. Without a bilingual Rosetta Stone or a much longer sample, we may never know if we are looking at a lost language or an elaborate system of signs. This debate is crucial because its outcome fundamentally changes how we view the civilization. A writing system implies a level of administrative complexity and literary culture on par with Egypt and Mesopotamia, while a symbolic system suggests a different, but no less sophisticated, path to organization. These unresolved questions are not dead ends for research. They are its very lifeblood. The mystery is the magnet that draws in new generations of archaeologists, geneticists, and climate scientists, each armed with new tools and fresh perspectives. The fact that we still don't have definitive answers for what happened to the Clovis people or what the Indus symbols mean is a testament to the depth and richness of the human past. It underscores the idea that history is not a solved puzzle but a dynamic field of inquiry, where a single new discovery, a previously unknown site, a novel method of DNA analysis, a fresh interpretation of sediment cores can overturn decades of accepted wisdom. This sense of ongoing discovery, of standing on the brink of understanding, is what makes the study of these silent civilizations so perpetually exciting. It forces a welcome humility upon us, reminding us that the past does not yield its secrets easily, and that our interpretations must always remain open to revision. This continuous cycle of hypothesis and investigation ensures that the legacies of these builders are not static relics, but living conversations that challenge us to keep looking, keep questioning, and keep listening for the whispers they left behind in the stones. To truly grasp the achievements of silent civilizations, it is incredibly revealing to place them side by side with their literate contemporaries, like the Sumerians of Mesopotamia or the Old Kingdom Egyptians. On the surface, the parallels are striking. Both types of societies mastered the art of urban living, constructing dense cities with specialized labor, sophisticated infrastructure, and complex social hierarchies. Both engaged in long-distance trade, exchanging luxury goods, raw materials, and crucially, ideas across vast networks. And both developed rich, all-encompassing religious systems that dictated everything from political power to daily rituals, expressing their beliefs in monumental architecture that was meant to last for eternity. The ziggurats of Ur and the pyramids of Giza share a common spiritual impulse with the great stone circles of Europe or the massive platforms of the Indus Valley, a deep-seated human desire to reach for the divine and to anchor a community's identity in something permanent and awe-inspiring. Where the paths dramatically diverge is in the technology of memory. For Mesopotamia and Egypt, the invention of writing cuneiform on clay tablets, hieroglyphs on temple walls, was a revolutionary accelerant. It allowed for a new kind of complexity in administration. A Sumerian bureaucrat could use writing to track the precise tax contributions of thousands of citizens across a sprawling empire, maintaining records that could be reviewed, audited, and referenced years later. An Egyptian pharaoh could issue decrees that were disseminated identically to every corner of his kingdom, ensuring a uniformity of law and command that was simply impossible through oral transmission alone. Writing created a detailed, durable bureaucracy. It allowed for the creation of detailed legal codes like the Code of Hammurabi, which established standardized laws and punishments. Perhaps most profoundly, it allowed individuals to speak with their own voices across the centuries. We know the names, the boasts, the poetry, and even the private letters of specific Egyptians and Mesopotamians, granting them a startling individuality that remains just out of reach for the people of the silent cultures. This does not mean, however, that the silent civilizations were less sophisticated. They simply achieved complexity through different, incredibly ingenious means. Without written lists, how do you manage a large-scale economy? The Indus Valley civilization appears to have done it through a remarkable system of standardization. Their uniform brick sizes, identical weight cubes, and even the organized layout of their cities themselves functioned as a form of non-verbal communication and control. The material culture was the bureaucracy. A trader from a distant city would know that the weights they brought would be accepted in Mohenjo-Daro without debate, because the standard was physically embedded in the objects themselves. Similarly, in the Andes, the Inca Empire managed a vast territory without writing by using the quipu, a complex system of knotted cords that scholars now believe was a sophisticated, three-dimensional recording device capable of logging numerical data and perhaps even narrative histories. The system relied on the skill and memory of trained specialists, the quipucamayok, who could read the knots. This was a living, tactile archive, an alternative path today to management that was every bit as effective as cuneiform for its specific context. This comparison powerfully challenges a deeply ingrained, often unconscious bias in how we define the very word civilization. For a long time, the standard historical narrative presented a linear progression where the invention of writing was the crucial dividing line between prehistory and history, between simple societies and complex ones. The accomplishments of cultures that flourished without it were often downplayed or forced into this flawed model, but the evidence compels us to reject this hierarchy. The Inca built the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas without the wheel or an alphabetic script. The megalithic builders of Europe demonstrated a grasp of astronomy and communal organization that rivals any contemporary literate society. They were not failed Mesopotamians, they were brilliant successes of their own unique cultural trajectories. They prove that human intelligence and innovation are not monolithic. The capacity for abstract thought, complex social organization, and artistic expression can be channeled through multiple mediums, through the spoken word, through symbolic art, through architecture, and through intricate physical systems like the quipu. Recognizing this incredible diversity of human innovation is perhaps the greatest lesson these silent builders have to teach us, forcing us to expand our understanding of what it means to be civilized and to appreciate the many ways a society can find its voice, even if it never picks up a stylus to write its name. So how do we move from a collection of silent, broken objects to a compelling story about a living, breathing culture? The work of an archaeologist or historian studying these vanished builders is less like reading a book and more like solving the world's most challenging jigsaw puzzle. Only most of the pieces are missing and the picture on the box has been lost to time. They begin with the fragments themselves, a scatter of pottery shards, the worn-down stub of a stone tool, the post holes that mark where a wooden house once stood. Each of these is a data point, a hard, factual clue left behind by real people. But these facts are mute, they don't speak for themselves. The true artistry of the discipline lies in the careful, responsible use of inference and imagination to weave these isolated points into a coherent, plausible narrative. It is a delicate balancing act, a constant dance between what we can prove and what we can reasonably propose, all while resisting the powerful temptation to let speculation run wild and fill in the gaps with satisfying but ultimately fictional details. This process demands a particular kind of intellectual humility. A responsible researcher must always be upfront about the limits of their knowledge, clearly distinguishing between what the evidence directly supports and what is an educated guess. For example, finding a concentration of deer bones near a hearth tells us they ate deer. Finding a finely crafted spear point nearby allows us to infer they hunted deer. But we must stop short of confidently describing the specific rituals of the hunt or the exact social status of the hunter unless we have much more corroborating evidence. This might seem like a limitation, but in truth, this acknowledgement of uncertainty is the field's greatest strength. It creates a framework of intellectual honesty where multiple interpretations can coexist and be tested against new evidence. Rather than presenting a single, definitive, and likely flawed story, this approach allows for a richer, more nuanced understanding. We can say, here is one possible explanation based on these clues, but here are two other compelling ways to view the same evidence. This doesn't weaken the narrative, it honors the complexity of the past and the ingenuity of the people we study. Think of it as the difference between a photograph and an impressionist painting. A photograph pretends to show a single, objective truth. An impressionist painting made up of countless individual dabs of color acknowledges that it is an interpretation. From a distance, it resolves into a beautiful, coherent scene, but up close, you can see the artist's hand, the individual strokes, the spaces between. The narratives we construct about silent civilizations are impressionist paintings. They are built from thousands of tiny, factual dabs of evidence, a carbon date here, a tool mark analysis there, a pollen sample from a burial site. They form a compelling whole, but we must never forget that they are interpretations. New evidence can always come along like a new dab of paint that shifts the entire picture and reveals a truth we never expected. This open-minded, self-correcting methodology is what allows the stories of these vanished builders to remain alive, dynamic, and endlessly fascinating, inviting us all to lean in closer and see what new details we might discover. Imagine the power to read a story not from ink on a page, but from the very atoms of an ancient artifact or the subtle genetic code preserved in a tooth for millennia. This is the breathtaking frontier of research into silent civilizations, a field being utterly transformed by a new wave of technological innovation that acts like a time machine, granting us senses sharp enough to perceive details our eyes could never see. The future of understanding these vanished builders lies not just in the trowel and brush, but increasingly in the silicon chip and the DNA sequencer, tools that are beginning to whisper the secrets that have been locked in silence for thousands of years. At the forefront of this revolution is artificial intelligence, particularly a branch known as machine learning. These are not sentient robots, but incredibly powerful pattern recognition systems. Their potential to crack the codes left by silent cultures is nothing short of revolutionary. Consider the enduring mystery of the Indus Valley script. For decades, linguists have struggled with its short, fragmented inscriptions. Now, AI algorithms can be unleashed on this entire corpus, analyzing thousands of symbols simultaneously to search for syntactic patterns, recurring combinations, and statistical regularities that might be invisible to the human brain. An AI doesn't get tired or frustrated. It can run millions of comparisons in the time it takes a researcher to drink a cup of coffee, testing countless hypothetical grammatical structures against the available data. It could, for instance, identify that a specific symbol always appears at the beginning of a sequence, like a capital letter, or that certain groupings act like prefixes or suffixes. While it may not provide a full translation overnight, AI offers our best hope for identifying the underlying logic of the script, providing the crucial first key to finally hearing the voices of the Indus people. Beyond writing, these same pattern recognition systems are being used to analyze satellite imagery on a continental scale, identifying the faintest traces of ancient footpaths, irrigation canals, or settlements buried just beneath the surface, effectively allowing us to map entire lost landscapes from orbit. While AI expands our view to the macro scale, advances in genetic science are zooming us into the most intimate level of all, the individual. The field of paleogenomics has exploded in recent years, moving from science fiction to standard archaeological practice. We can now extract and sequence ancient DNA from skeletal remains that are thousands of years old. This isn't just about determining hair or eye color. It's a tool for writing the biography of entire populations. By analyzing the genetic material from a burial site, scientists can now trace epic migration routes with stunning precision. They can determine if the builders of a particular megalithic tomb were descended from local hunter-gatherers or from a wave of farmers who arrived from distant regions, rewriting our understanding of how cultures spread and interacted. On a personal level, a DNA can reveal heartbreakingly human details. From the calculus on teeth, we can learn about an individual's diet and the bacteria they carried. We can diagnose diseases they suffered from and see evidence of physical trauma healed long before death. Perhaps most powerfully, by comparing the DNA of people buried together, we can reconstruct family trees, identifying siblings, parents, and children, transforming an anonymous grave into a family plot and giving us a glimpse of the kinship bonds that were the foundation of these silent societies. This new era of discovery is shattering the old boundaries between academic disciplines. The lone archaeologist working in isolation is being replaced by integrated dream teams of specialists. A single excavation project might now involve a geoarchaeologist to read the soil history, a paleobotanist to analyze ancient seeds and pollen, a materials scientist to study the composition of metals and pigments, and a data scientist to create complex digital models of the entire site. This interdisciplinary approach is like assembling an investigative unit where each expert brings a different piece of the puzzle. The climate scientist's data on an ancient drought can be layered with the archaeologist's evidence of abandoned villages and the geneticist's findings of population decline, creating a multi-layered, undeniable narrative of collapse and resilience. These collaborations are yielding a much richer, more nuanced, and frankly, more human understanding of the past, moving beyond simple descriptions of what happened to explore the complex reasons why. All of this digitally born data, the genetic sequences, the satellite maps, the 3D models of artifacts, creates a powerful new form of preservation. These digital archives ensure that the memory of these fragile sites is safeguarded against the threats of looting, climate change, and urban expansion. More importantly, this data becomes a permanent resource for future generations. 100 years from now, a researcher with tools we can't yet imagine will be able to re-examine the same genetic data or high-resolution scan, asking new questions and extracting answers we are not even capable of seeking today. This forward-looking perspective is fundamentally optimistic. It tells us that the conversation with these silent builders is not over. In fact, it is just beginning. With every technological leap, we gain a new dictionary, a new lens, a new way to listen. The stories of these vanished civilizations are not static relics to be fully uncovered and then filed away. They are living narratives that continue to evolve, ensuring that the legacy of those who built without writing will never again be silenced. Standing amidst the ruins of a civilization that left no written records does something profound to you. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's a deeply personal, almost humbling experience that shifts your perspective on time and your own place within it. You find yourself looking at a stone that was carefully shaped and set by another human being thousands of years ago, and for a moment, the chasm of centuries collapses. You are connected to them not by language or shared history, but by the simple, universal act of creation. That pot they painted, that wall they built, that symbol they carved, it was their way of saying, I was here. My life had meaning, and in that moment you can't help but turn that question inward. In our own modern world, so saturated with digital noise and fleeting content, what are we building that will truly last? What silent stones are we leaving for the future? The stories of these vanished builders resonate so powerfully today because they speak directly to the core challenges we face. Their incredible creativity in the face of limited technology is a masterclass in innovation. Their ability to achieve breathtaking communal projects, like moving the blue stones of Stonehenge or constructing the perfect sewer systems of the Indus Valley, shows a level of cooperation and long-term thinking that feels both alien and urgently necessary. In an era of climate change and social fragmentation, their stories are not quaint relics. They are a source of timeless lessons. They teach us about resilience in the face of environmental disaster, about the strength found in community rather than in individual glorification, and about the profound impact of adapting to the world rather than trying to endlessly dominate it. They achieved sustainability not as a political slogan, but as a practical necessity for survival, and in doing so, they left a blueprint etched into the very landscape. This connection doesn't require a plane ticket to a distant archaeological site, though visiting these places is a transformative experience. The sense of wonder is accessible to anyone. It can happen in the quiet halls of a museum, when you lock eyes with a 5,000-year-old jade carving from the Liangzhu culture and feel the artist's skill and intention radiating from it. It can happen in your own backyard, finding a simple arrowhead and realizing you are the first person to hold it since its owner lost it, creating a tangible link to a life lived long ago. Even the simple act of looking up at the night sky, seeing the same stars that the builders of Newgrange or the Nazca people used to navigate and mark their calendars, can trigger a feeling of continuity. You are part of the same human journey, a participant in a story that began millennia before you and will continue long after. This personal engagement transforms history from a dry list of dates into a living, breathing conversation across time. That sense of connection naturally brings with it a sense of responsibility. When you feel a personal link to these silent stones, the thought of them being looted, eroded by climate change, or bulldozed for a new development becomes unthinkable. It feels like a personal loss, a severing of a thread that connects us all. This deepening appreciation is the first and most crucial step toward stewardship. It moves the preservation of these sites from an abstract academic concern to a shared human imperative, a duty we owe not only to the past but to the future. It compels us to ensure that these fragile whispers from our collective ancestry are not silenced forever, so that generations to come can stand in those same places and feel the same awe, asking their own questions and finding their own inspiration in the enduring legacy of those who built the world with their hands, their hearts, and their silence. But how do we ensure that these powerful, silent stories don't just remain locked away in academic journals or behind museum glass? The answer lies in a dynamic and growing global movement dedicated to public engagement and educational outreach. This isn't about dumbing down complex archaeology. It's about building bridges of understanding, using every tool at our disposal to invite people from all walks of life into the fascinating detective work of uncovering the past. The goal is to transform these ancient narratives from distant mysteries into a living, breathing part of our shared global heritage, ensuring they are not just preserved but passionately celebrated and passed on. Museums have undergone a revolution in this regard. Gone are the days of simply lining up artifacts in a glass case with a small, dry card labeling them. The modern approach is immersive and experiential. Walk into an exhibit on the Indus Valley civilization today, and you might find yourself surrounded by the sounds of a bustling ancient city, with life-sized reconstructions of its orderly streets and sophisticated drainage systems. Interactive touchscreens allow you to virtually excavate a site, making the careful layer-by-layer process of archaeology tangible. You can handle 3D printed replicas of those enigmatic seals, turning them over in your hands and trying your own hand at deciphering their mysterious symbols. These multi-sensory experiences do more than just inform. They create an emotional connection. A child seeing a full-scale replica of a megalithic tomb isn't just learning about history. They are feeling the awe of its scale, sparking a curiosity that a textbook could never ignite. This is where the silent stones truly begin to speak to a new generation. The digital realm has completely exploded the possibilities for access and immersion. Documentaries now utilize cutting-edge CGI to rebuild ancient capitals like the Inca's Cusco or the Minoan Palace of Knossos from ruins into vibrant, living cities, populated with virtual people going about their daily lives. But the engagement goes far beyond passive viewing. Universities and cultural institutions are now creating vast online archives and virtual reality experiences. With a VR headset, anyone, anywhere in the world, can now take a guided tour of the Lascaux caves without risking damage to the fragile original art, or stand atop the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan to appreciate the breathtaking scale of its construction. Furthermore, platforms like YouTube and interactive websites allow archaeologists to share their discoveries in real time, hosting live Q&A sessions from dig sites and explaining the significance of a find just hours after it's been carefully brushed free of soil. This demolishes the old ivory tower, making the process of discovery a collaborative, open conversation between experts and the public. Perhaps the most powerful form of engagement is the hands-on experience. Across the globe, programs often called community digs or public archaeology initiatives are inviting amateur enthusiasts to actually participate in real, ongoing excavations under professional supervision. Imagine spending a week carefully sifting through earth at a site, feeling the incredible thrill of uncovering a piece of pottery that hasn't been touched by human hands in over 3,000 years. This first-hand involvement is transformative. It teaches respect for the meticulous nature of the work, a deep understanding of context, and a personal stake in the preservation of the site. It turns abstract knowledge into personal memory. For local communities living near these ancient sites, this involvement is even more crucial. It empowers them as stewards of their own heritage, providing economic opportunity through cultural tourism and ensuring that the narrative of the silent civilization is told with their voice and from their perspective, rather than being dictated solely by outside academics. This vast and growing effort to engage the public is about so much more than just generating interest. It is a vital act of preservation in itself. By sharing these stories widely and making them accessible and exciting, we are building a global constituency of people who care. These are the future advocates who will support funding for archaeological research, who will speak out against the looting of cultural sites, and who will instill in their own children a sense of wonder for the deep past. They become the guardians of this silent legacy. This commitment to education ensures that the lessons of these vanished builders, their ingenuity, their resilience, their triumphs, and their failures, are not lost to time, but are actively woven into the fabric of our modern understanding, reminding us of our shared humanity and our profound responsibility to learn from the echoes of the past. Perhaps the most profound lesson these silent builders offer is a radical redefinition of civilization itself. For too long, we have measured a society's advancement almost exclusively by its proximity to our own, by its use of writing, its development of metallurgy, its creation of towering monuments. This lens has often unfairly relegated the incredible achievements of non-literate cultures to a lesser status, viewing them as precursors to real history rather than as brilliant, complete successes in their own right. The Indus Valley, with its flawless urban planning yet undeciphered script, and the megalithic cultures, with their celestial genius yet silent stones, forcefully challenge this hierarchy. They demonstrate that the true markers of a complex civilization are not the tools it uses to record itself, but the qualities it demonstrates in its daily existence: breathtaking creativity in the face of limitation, deep-seated cooperation for the communal good, and profound resilience in adapting to a changing world. Their legacy is a powerful argument that a society's greatness is found not in its archives, but in its actions and its enduring spirit. In our current era of digital deluge and information overload, where knowledge is often seen as something to be consumed quickly and discarded, the wisdom of these silent cultures feels more vital than ever. We have become obsessed with recording everything, yet we often fail to preserve the most meaningful kinds of knowledge: the practical, the experiential, the deeply cultural. The vanished builders remind us to value the wisdom that is not written down but is lived and practiced. They teach the importance of oral traditions, where stories carry the weight of law, history, and identity across generations. They highlight the power of art and symbol to convey complex truths that transcend language, and they exemplify the strength of community practices where skills are passed hand to hand, from master to apprentice, in a continuous chain of shared learning that requires presence, patience, and personal connection. This is knowledge that resides in the hands, the heart, and the communal memory, and it is arguably far more resilient and sustainable than any data stored on a fragile server. This perspective offers us crucial insights for navigating our own global challenges, particularly around sustainability and cultural diversity. The silent builders were master adapters, their technologies and social structures finely tuned to their specific environments. The Inca terracing systems and the ancestral Puebloan water conservation methods are not just historical footnotes. They are blueprints for living in balance with the natural world, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of ecology that we are only now relearning in the face of climate change. Furthermore, their incredible diversity of social organization, from the potential matrilineal structures of the Minoans to the enigmatic, possibly oligarchic system of the Indus Valley, shows us that there is no single, correct way to structure a human society. Their examples stand as a powerful testament to the rich tapestry of human possibility, encouraging us to embrace different models of community, governance, and belonging in our increasingly interconnected world. Ultimately, the silent stones and enigmatic symbols these cultures left behind are a permanent reminder of the impermanence of all human endeavors. Every civilization, no matter how powerful or seemingly permanent, has its season. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and the abandoned circles of Stonehenge are not failures. They are poignant and powerful monuments to the cycle of time itself. They ask us to consider what we are building today that will truly endure, not in steel and glass, but in its positive impact on the planet and its people. What non-written wisdom are we passing on? What stories will our material culture tell about our values 1,000 years from now? The spirit of these vanished builders, their innovation, their mystery, their deep connection to community and cosmos is not a relic to be studied. It is a living invitation, a charge to carry forward their legacy of building a world that is not just recorded, but is truly worth remembering. Throughout this exploration, we have ventured deep into the silent world of civilizations that shaped our human story not with ink and parchment, but with stone, earth, and shared memory. We have seen how the meticulous science of archaeology decodes the language of artifacts, transforming scattered pottery shards and burial sites into intimate stories of daily life, trade, and social structure. We have listened to the echoes of oral traditions, where indigenous Australian Dreamtime stories accurately recalled landscapes from millennia ago, and where later Greek myths held kernels of truth about the mighty Minoans. We have learned to read the powerful symbolism etched into the Nazca Desert and carved onto Easter Island's moai, understanding that these were not mere decorations, but profound expressions of belief, astronomy, and identity. From the eerily planned cities of the Indus Valley to the celestial stone circles of Europe, these cultures teach us a humbling and transformative lesson: that human complexity, ingenuity, and spirit do not require the written word to flourish. They achieved staggering feats of engineering, organized vast societies, and pondered the mysteries of the cosmos through alternative mediums, through architecture that served as both calendar and temple, through art that conveyed myth and lore, and through oral knowledge passed down with meticulous care. Their legacy challenges our deeply ingrained bias that equates history solely with written records and forces us to expand our definition of what it means to be civilized. They were not primitive, they were simply different, choosing to invest their genius into the physical and the spoken word, creating a durable legacy that has weathered centuries of silence. This journey invites a powerful personal reflection. In our own modern era, defined by a constant digital deluge and ephemeral content, what will we leave behind? Our emails and social media posts may be lost to obsolete formats, but what are the silent stones we are setting in place today? Perhaps it is the communities we build, the knowledge we pass on through mentorship and practice, or the ways we choose to live sustainably with our planet. The vanished builders remind us that the most enduring legacies are often those built with intention, cooperation, and a respect for the world around us. They encourage us to consider what future archaeologists might deduce about our values from the physical traces we leave in the landscape. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What questions about these silent civilizations linger in your mind? What messages do you think our own society is unconsciously leaving for the future? Share your reflections in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation together. If unraveling history's deepest mysteries brings you as much wonder as it does me, please subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss our next adventure into the past. Thank you for your time and your curiosity. Thank you for joining me in tracing the footsteps of the builders who vanished, and for remembering that the most profound stories are often those told not with words, but with action, creation, and silent endurance.